Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longery. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you live from the SCC studios out of White Bear Lake. And through a cooperative agreement, this program is also simultaneously broadcast to those studios out of the Roseville viewing area, the CTV studios. As a result of this cooperative effort, this program reaches out to and serves live approximately 28 communities in the Northeast metropolitan area. Tonight's program is April 16th, 2014. So if you are watching while we're the live broadcast, I encourage you to call in with questions or comments that you may have for me this evening. Now, we do rebroadcast this program at other dates and times and at other public access studios. So unfortunately, if you find yourself watching one of our recablecast editions of Off the Record News, you won't be able to call in. However, you can always reach me on Facebook 24/7. And from time to time, people who are watching the program either do have questions or they think, gee, I have a great topic that we should get on Off the Record News, and I certainly welcome any input or ideas that you have. Because after all, public access TV is your TV. It's the citizens' TV. And it's a way to communicate what's going on in your community or in your organization, or maybe, quite frankly, you just have a topic that you are very interested in, that you want to talk more about, that you want to have that discussion in a public forum for a whole hour so that other people can understand what the issues are, where your passion lies, or just simply what's going on in our community. Now, this evening, we are going to be using film footage from actually the Planning Commission meeting of Maplewood last night, Tuesday night, that was April 15th. And for those of you who don't live in Maplewood, I just want to reinforce that many of the topics that we're going to touch on actually do apply to other communities as well, in looking at overall general public policy and how we do our planning, in this case with regard to streetscaping, creating pedestrian crosswalks, and designing a roadway in such a way that it is user-friendly not only for pedestrians, but automobiles, senior citizens who might be in their little motorized carts, all of these types of issues. It just happens to be that the meeting that we're going to be using as the case example happens to be the Planning Commission of Maplewood. And as we go through these clips, I think you will find many of the same issues that they address, even though they're talking about it specifically about the Gladstone neighborhood there at Frost and English, that it could be basically just substitute the names for a different development in a different community, and you will find that many of the principles hold true. Also, the questions and the discussion points hold true. Now, let's back up a moment. The Gladstone neighborhood in Maplewood is sort of centrally located in Maplewood. Maplewood, of course, is sort of shaped like an upside-down L. And so Gladstone is off of Frost and in English, and that junction of those two major streets. And it is one of the oldest areas of Maplewood. It was originally the village of Gladstone long, long ago. And there's actually a little historical book written about the village of Gladstone and its history. And there was, where the Savannah is today, which is supposedly a neighborhood preserve, originally there was the railroads had their roundabout there where they did train exchange with a locomotive and some other maintenance of locomotives, from my understanding. And then from then, it was then went on to be a site where they had other industrial, not the railroad, but there was other industrial types of uses. And then from there, it eventually found its way into the hands of Maplewood to be restored as a neighborhood preserve. And there's been a lot of controversy with regard to the Savannah because it was actually quite a wooded site in many of the areas of that Savannah. But then within the last 2 years, the city went through and basically clear cut out almost, well, 75%, I think, of the trees that are recognizable or that were large that you could see from the roadway. And so a lot of people feel that really that now the Savannah, it doesn't appear to be any type of neighborhood preserve whatsoever. And I've had people who live just south and west of there who typically in the past had a lot of different wildlife basically going from point A to point B until on their way to going to the Savannah, that they have reported to me that they don't see the wildlife migrating through like they used to go to the Savannah, that they actually see none of that now anymore. And it just means that the animals have changed their routes. They have found a different place to habitat, and it's not the Savannah. But let's get started with our film footage from the Planning Commission of April 15th, and the topic is talking about the infrastructure development that's going to go on, or that they're proposing to go on, in that intersection of Frost and English, now that they know that the bowling alley is closed and that a developer wants to go in and put in affordable housing in a big 4-story building on the corner. So let's take a look.
Overview of the Gladstone Phase 2 improvements.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Commissioner, this evening we have John Horn with Kimley Horn here to present a presentation to the Commission to explain planned Gladstone improvement changes along Frost Avenue and English Street.
I want to spend a little bit of time with you tonight to give you a little background on the Gladstone Phase 2 improvement project. There are a number of things that have happened over the history of the project that are really establishing the precedence for this project. There's a Gladstone Neighborhood Redevelopment Plan, or the Master Plan, that dates back to March of 2007. In addition, there was a master plan that was prepared for the Gladstone Savannah at the corner of Frost and English that was adopted back in November of 2011. There's also improvements that have already been made in the area, which is just west of the project area here from 61 over to East Shore Drive, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then also Metropolitan Council Livable Communities are an LCDA grant application the city was successful in.
Now, in many areas of municipal development, especially if they're looking to develop an entire neighborhood, a community will put together what's called a master plan. And that master plan sets forth the land uses currently, what they're proposed to be. It's oftentimes developed from obtaining community and citizen input. And for those folks who lived in Maplewood back in 2003 through 2005 and 6, who were part of the Gladstone neighborhood, they remember very well the process that was gone through in the Gladstone area to put together the master plan. Because originally, the city administrators had a much different vision for how Gladstone was going to be recrafted. And the citizens of Gladstone, to their credit, became very active and very involved. And through the process of community discussion, change in leadership on the elected officials on the city council, there was more citizen input that was put into the plan. And oftentimes I see that some master plans really, while they say they've got a lot of citizen input, if you really dig down deep, they don't have as much citizen input as they purport to represent. The Gladstone master plan that was adopted in 2007 had some elements of what the city administration originally had wanted to have as part of the Gladstone master plan, but it had a lot of elements of the citizens plan that was put together by the Gladstone Coalition, a group of citizens of about 200 who were quite a force to be reckoned with, and they helped in crafting that master plan. And that master plan is available from the city of Maplewood, just as with any municipality that has a master plan for any of their areas that they are focusing on. That's a public document, and citizens are entitled to be able to look at it. They can get a copy of it. There may be a small cost to the copy that you obtain. It depends on what your city's protocols are with regard to obtaining public data such as that. But it is available, and it is something that a council generally adopts by a vote. And while it isn't necessarily a rule or a law that the council has to go by, it is a guide to their decision making with regard to that neighborhood, just as the Gladstone master plan is for Gladstone. So let's continue on with our film clip.
In terms of the neighborhood master plan, there's a number of guiding principles that were really established for Gladstone. I'll just run through these really quick. Really consider Gladstone as a village, transform the regional trails into celebrated village corridors, so the Vento Trail and the Gateway Trail. Make Gladstone a compelling quality of life choice. Consider the natural and ecological components of the neighborhood as we go through the development process. Allow Gladstone's future to tell the story of its past. Improve walkability in the area. Think of Gladstone as a neighborhood for all stages of life. The senior housing development that's recently been completed at the corner of East Shore Drive and Frost Avenue. Make the redevelopment process a plan, a model for others to follow, and then also make multimodal links between Gladstone areas and beyond, considering the trails and the transit systems in the area.
So many of these principles are indeed right out of the master plan. But when you're thinking about them and you're hearing the words, you might think to yourself, but what do they mean? Quality of life. That Gladstone have a quality of life. Well, that could mean many different things for many different people. But generally speaking, to have a good housing stock, to have access to parks and trails, to have a convenient access in and off of the freeway system, to have a safe and convenient neighborhood, and safe. And that was one of the issues that oftentimes came up when the community talked about what they wanted for Gladstone, that they wanted to have it look more spruced up, and that maybe if there was some housing stock that needed to be refurbished, or businesses that needed to be refurbished, that maybe there should be money made available so that those individuals would be able to renovate perhaps their buildings, like in the event of, like, say, some of the businesses along there. I mean, those were some of the discussions that went on. Now, another concept was that it would be a neighborhood for all, well, they said all stages, but I like to think of it as all ages, because in Gladstone there is a good variety of affordable single-family housing homes. And what that means is that many families can move into Gladstone, find an affordable first-time home for their family that they can raise their children in, and from there then they can move maybe to another area, or however it works out. But many of the homes in Gladstone, the homeowners originally maybe built those houses back in the 50s or the 60s, and that they've lived there quite a while, and that as they decide that they've been there for 40 years, maybe they want to move to a different location, but close still to their neighborhood. And that's where that concept came in of saying, well, let's find out if there's a way that we can put senior housing into the Gladstone neighborhood, because folks who are currently in their single-family homes may want to not care for so much of that, the house and the yard work, but they would still like to stay in the neighborhood. So that was part of the concept of that Gladstone master plan. And again, that's very consistent with the conversation that you hear in other communities as well, is that folks who are moving from their single-family homes and then there are new families moving in, that the folks who are leaving that have maybe been in that neighborhood for 40 years would still like to maybe stay close to that neighborhood because they're familiar with where they can shop, they're familiar with the neighborhood, many of their friends are there, even perhaps, well, maybe their own children have moved into their house, and they would be close to their own families. So there's a lot of benefit of having many different types of housing stock within a neighborhood, but yet have them set up for folks of different ages. So let's continue on with the next clip.
This might look familiar. This is the master plan that was prepared for the Gladstone Savannah, again, just south of Frost Avenue, west of English Street. Demonstrates some stormwater improvements in the area, as well as a number of sidewalk and trails improvements, doing other things to just really freshen up the existing Gladstone Savannah and make the area much more welcoming to visitors, to really turn it into a highlight of the neighborhood. And then the Phase 1 improvements. I mentioned that improvements have already been made from Highway 61, which is just on the left side of this exhibit, over past the East Shore Drive roundabout. These are improvements that were completed here a few years ago, involved the reconstruction of some of the infrastructure and a number of aesthetic and urban design enhancements. We've got some pictures out here just to give you a sense of that. So this is a picture down Frost Avenue. We use decorative street lighting, a number of landscaping improvements. The center median down Frost Avenue that you see in this picture was added in to make Frost Avenue much more of a boulevard type roadway versus the wide open, multi-lane facility that it was previous to the improvements.
Now, in that clip, the first image we saw was the footprint of the Savannah to show how it's been changed. Now, in my mind, I think we should just call the neighborhood preserve the Savannah, not a neighborhood preserve any longer. I do not think it is a neighborhood preserve. It has been transformed into a park area, because in my mind there is a difference between a neighborhood preserve and a park. And if you look at that footprint that we just saw on the screen, and you look at it more carefully, it has more elements consistent with that of a park than with a neighborhood preserve, where you might find a habitat for the wildlife of the community to live. And nobody has come out and said that straight out, but I think that as you see the development moving forward, either with the 4-story affordable housing apartment building or any of the other improvements that they're talking about and how they talk about them, I think you'll agree that the Savannah has now been converted from a neighborhood preserve to a park area. Another thing I want to bring up is that they were talking about the street improvements. Now, this is where we're starting to get into the conversation about the infrastructure. And that last picture that we looked at, what that showed is the actual improvements that was done by what is called the Shores now, which is the senior assisted living there off of Frost. However, one issue that I have brought up in the past to the council that is not addressed during this whole presentation, and it doesn't seem to ever be approached when they're talking about road improvement projects that are near wetlands is the issue of the large curbs. And you'll notice there that when you have a median in the middle of the road, such as that was illustrated there of what's on Frost currently by the shores, that when you have a median like that, you have a large curb next to where the street meets the land, and then there's the curb going up over the boulevard in the median boulevard, and then another curb, and then a curb on the far other side of the street. So when you've got a wetland on both sides of the street, or even a wetland on one side of the street, you have to be thinking about the wildlife that is in and around the wetlands, such as turtles. And people have seen many times turtles in areas such as this, whether or not it's Frost or anywhere else where you've got a street with the high curbs, that there are turtles in the road where they cannot get up or down over those curbs. And this issue came before the council not too long ago, this past summer, when I actually observed the largest snapping turtle I have ever seen in Maplewood. Actually, it lost its life. So I brought this issue up before the council, and I would like not only Maplewood, but other communities to be aware of the issue that when you are developing infrastructure by wetlands, if you insist upon using high curbs, there is going to be a cost to the turtle population. And experts estimate that when a snapping turtle is killed, that actually has a great impact on then the reproduction of that generation of turtles, because of the way that their age is and what their life cycle is. But let's take a look at this little side clip I have that I want to share with you with regard to what we need to do to protect our turtles when we're doing infrastructure projects by wetlands.
3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Diana Longry, 1771 Burr Street. If I could, I'd like to use the overhead.
Can you, let's see, last time we tried to use it, of course, all the things turned off, but give it a shot. You need to either pull your picture down or push it up, or I don't know which way it goes.
Okay. Okay. So today I just wanted to share with you that I had the opportunity of seeing the largest snapping turtle I ever saw in Maplewood, and this is that snapping turtle right there on the screen. Now, unfortunately, by the time that I came upon him, he was dead. And maybe this doesn't seem to be a big issue, but I think it is, because unfortunately, this is a very big snapping turtle. This is in front of the shores on Frost Avenue. He was apparently trying to go from one wetland to the other wetland. And he was the victim. Now you can see how big he is. That's to scale. You can see there's a regular sized man's wallet and keys. He was the victim of two things. One that's in our control, one that is not within our control. The item that's not within our control is either the reckless or the vindictive driver who drove over him. The thing that we do have control over, however, is the type of curbs that we put in our road projects when they are in wetland areas. Because you see, unfortunately, this turtle, as many turtles in my neighborhood, because I live right next to 500 Ripley, which the city pumps out all the time, which everybody knows is there's a lot of wetland there. We have these same kind of curbs in my neighborhood, and my neighbor and I, we are forever rescuing turtles who are unable to traverse those curbs and get from one spot of a pond to another pond. And so at the same time that I was waiting for the city to come to remove this poor turtle off the roadway and to give him a decent burial, at the same time there was a mother duck and her ducklings also trying to cross near the same area, having the same problem, that the mother duck and her two stronger ducklings could jump the curb, but the three other smaller ducklings, unfortunately, they had to keep jumping, and finally there was a Good Samaritan driver who stopped in the middle of the road, so all the other vehicles had to stop to let those ducklings jump up the curve, and then when they got across the other side, they had to do the same thing all over again. I would like the city to consider that when we are putting curbs in wetland areas, that we use the other type of curb, which allow our wildlife that's having problems traversing the curbs to actually be able to go from one wetland to the next, because we do not know where their travel corridors are, and I think this would be helpful for them. And it's unfortunate for this turtle that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I wanted to bring this to the attention, and I do want to say thank you to Chris, who is the sustainability technician, who went out and brought a shovel, and we buried the turtle off to the side of the road, so that way at least he wasn't sitting there for other cars just to keep driving over him needlessly. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so this is an issue that isn't just a Maplewood issue. This is actually an issue that affects all communities wherever they have wetlands. And it is true that this also affects ducks, geese, anything else that is going across our highways and our roadways when they're going from one place to the other, especially in wetland areas. And that's where you see a lot of this concern. Now let's move on to the next clip as they continue on to talk about some of the improvements in addition to that median that they have done so far in the Gladstone area.
This is a picture of the roundabout at East Shore Drive and Frost Avenue. And again, see the landscaping improvements and the things that were done to the area to improve the aesthetics. Ground level shot of the roundabout. You can see the limestone stone that was used as a part of the roundabout design. Again, trying to think about some of the historical components of the area and really use some of those historical components for the future improvements.
Now, one of the lessons that we can learn from the design of this roundabout, which is very important, that can be applied to all communities and certainly to other roundabouts that will be installed in Maplewood, is the placement of the light poles. Now, in this particular roundabout, the light poles were positioned in such a way that in the wintertime, when it's icy and snowy, the light poles, for whatever reason, were placed exactly at the trajectory spot that if you go out of control when you are driving around that roundabout, that you're doggone close to hitting the light pole. And several of the light poles have already been hit by vehicles and have fallen over and have had to been replaced. And so how can a city better design their roundabouts when they're putting the light poles? Well, perhaps the light poles should be on the inside circle of the roundabout rather than the outside of the circle. Because you got to think about that if the car is going out of control as it enters that roundabout, where is it going to land up? It's not necessarily landing up in the middle of the roundabout. It's landing up on the outside of that roundabout. And certainly don't put the light poles exactly where you think the car is going to land if it goes out of control. That would be an important lesson for all cities to take away from this particular design of this roundabout. Let's go on to our next clip.
And this shows the bridge that was reconstructed along Frost Avenue, west of East Shore Drive. Existing bridge had a limestone facade on it. When the bridge was reconstructed, a number of those limestone elements were incorporated into the design. You can also see in the left-hand corner of this picture some interpretive elements were installed as well to help tell the story and the history of Gladstone.
Now, this bridge is also another good example of perhaps one design not to do. When they designed the bridge, the side of the bridge that faces where the park kind of area is underneath the bridge, that side was actually designed in such a way that you could kind of see it in this picture, but that there's like a little iron wrought fence along the railing along the side of the bridge there. But when you're on top of the bridge and you're driving over the bridge, you will notice something very peculiar. It actually appears that the bridge is not fully completed because the one side is decorative and has the railing. The other side is totally absent of the decorative and the railing. And so it's like one side is from one kind of a bridge, the other side is from another type of a bridge. So it's not symmetrical. And oftentimes it is talked about that that bridge is actually the gateway into Gladstone. And I would think that when you're looking at designing a gateway into a community, that you would like to have the same design elements on both sides of the bridge so that that way there's some continuity to your design and that it looks like it's finished. Another takeaway in looking at design elements and how something looks once it's completed. Let's continue on.
I mentioned the LCDA grant, so the city competed for it and was successful in receiving $1.9 million to make improvements to the Gladstone area, so it was a significant accomplishment for the city. Of that $1.9 million, $1 million was allocated for site assembly for the villages at Frost and English Development, and I'll show a picture of that here in a minute. The other $900,000 was really allocated for the city to make infrastructure improvements in support of that redevelopment project. And then that $900,000 was made available for street reconstruction, sidewalks and trails, streetscape enhancements, and then stormwater improvements.
Now, you noticed it talked about $1 million for site acquisition. Well, basically what that means in plain English is that the Maplewood Bowl site has a certain sale price on it, where it says for sale, and here's the price. Well, in order to entice the developer to purchase that and put affordable housing there that are below market rate for rental rates, this $1 million is used to supplement what other money he can raise from other governmental sources and a few pennies from his own pocket, and use that then to pay the price that the landowner wants. So when they're talking about site acquisition, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about buying down the price of the land so that the developer has basically $1 million already that he can deduct off of that for sale price, so to speak, that's what that means. So let's continue on.
This shows a concept plan for that villages at Frost and English Development, again just north of Frost Avenue, west of English Street. Shows a mixture of both residential and commercial redevelopment. I know the developer's working on this, and I'm assuming you'll see this in the near future. But again, we're just trying to consider this improvement project as we're looking at the public infrastructure. So the public infrastructure project is shown on this location map. Again, it's about 2,000 feet of Frost Avenue, just east or just west of English Street, as well as along English Street from about the Gateway Trail down to Ripley.
And this particular project, from everything that I've heard at the various council meetings and commission meetings, is it's projected to be 4 stories tall. And from my recollection, I believe that the master plan for Gladstone indicated that the tallest would be 3 stories. Now, talking about design, many of the elements that were talked about in the Gladstone master plan, of the elements of the building design, is that buildings that are new coming into the neighborhood are to be consistent in their design and character with other existing buildings in the neighborhood, so that the new buildings are to be more conforming to the neighborhood rather than the new buildings being whatever they want to be and then the rest of the neighborhood conforming to them. Let's continue.
The improvements that are being considered in this area is the reconstruction of Frost Avenue. It's in poor condition. In addition, we're looking at installing some center medians in locations similar to what was done in the Phase 1 project. We're also looking at improving the pavement on English Street, burying the existing overhead utilities. That was done as a part of the Phase 1 project, and it's being proposed as a part of this project as well. The extension of sidewalks, trails, lighting, street furnishings, just a number of amenities to improve the condition of the area. We're looking at stormwater improvements and consistent with Maplewood's approach, looking at rain gardens and infiltration techniques, since it's a big part of how the city likes to do things. And then in addition, while we're in the area, City Parks Department has asked us to consider looking at potential improvements to Fleet Check Park, as well as improvements in the Savannah area, basically the interface between Frost Avenue and the entrances into the Savannah area. This is a graphic that kind of shows the project area. Again, it's about 2,000 feet of Frost Avenue, west of the English Street roundabout. Shows reconstruction of the streets, shows a number of landscaping enhancements, rain gardens on the south side in the area of the Savannah, and then a center median really through the redevelopment area. I've got a cross section that kind of shows that. So Frost Avenue will go from a wide 48 to 52-foot wide roadway to more of a parkway type setting in the redevelopment area with a landscape center median and travel lanes in each direction, as well as some on-street parking. And you can see the street lights and some of the landscaping enhancements consistent with the improvements that were done as a part of the Phase 1 project.
Now keep in mind, picture this. On the corner of Frost and English, where the Maplewood Bowl is, that is where they're going to put the redevelopment structure. That's got a couple phases to it. The first phase is 55 units of affordable housing, with some of those units being rental units of under $250 a month. And approximately 80% of the 55 units are all some form of affordable housing of some type. And at a recent meeting, they talked about that there will be 10 of those 55 rental units that will be voucher units set aside supposedly for veterans. But we haven't seen the documentation of that. And that's just what they have disclosed now, is that 10 of the 55 units will be voucher units for veterans. And also then the next phase, Phase 2, will be adding on senior affordable housing. And then the third phase, should they get to that, that's when they will be adding the commercial retail to it. And the question always is whether or not you will have the foot traffic or the market to be able to put commercial retail in an area such as this type of development. Is there the discretionary income of the people who live there to actually support the type of retail that they're envisioning? Because this is more of a neighborhood destination. It's not a destination that people from outside of the Gladstone area come to. It's simply a neighborhood area. And the other thing that I want to make mention of is that across from that proposed development is the Savannah. And you notice how they talked about on Frost there that they were going to be putting a big long median in the middle of Frost, up and down Frost, right along that whole development area, that's where they were going to put a median. As we move along in our film footage, you will hear the questions of, well then how are the people who are all in this redevelopment area, how are they going to walk across Frost and walk across that median to get to the Savannah Park? Well now, isn't that an interesting question? Especially when you consider that the median that they have down by the shores has vegetation and landscaping that in some areas is 3 or 4 feet tall, and if you have a pedestrian walking across through there, they may not be noticed by vehicles who are traveling down the other side. Now, I understand that we have a caller on the line, so let's take our caller and see what they've got on their mind. Thank you for calling in. How can we help you?
Mayor Longley, thank you for protecting the open spaces in the parks in Maplewood and knowing the difference. And, I know that a lot of us voted for the open space referendum because we knew it would be preserved for wildlife and for the future, that they would not be putting parks and playground equipment, and they wouldn't be cutting all the trees down, and they'd be letting wildlife live there. Now, when they went ahead and decided that was going to be a recreation area, and they went in there and bulldozed all the trees down and chipped them up, and changed it from an open space to a recreation area. Did they take a vote saying we are changing this from an open space area to a recreation area? And one thing I've noticed about the new mayor up there, she seems to be very lazy. She doesn't seem to do her homework. Does she even know what's going on or what has gone on with the open space of Savannah, which has been changed? And are all the other open spaces now endangered to the same fate if city leaders decide we'll just put playground equipment, or we will put a drainage retaining pond in there? Thanks, Mayor Longley.
Well, first of all, your observation that it's a recreation area is spot on, because you must have watched this meeting, because there is reference to it as a recreation area. And neighborhood preserves, I don't think that they've ever been, up to this point, ever described as a recreation area. Now, of course, recreation can be active, it can be passive, true enough. And you certainly could go to a neighborhood preserve and simply, walk through a trail, be peaceful in your walk through nature. And that is passive recreation. But the context of it, as they talk about it, it seems to take on more of an active recreation concept. The other idea about the neighborhood preserves protected. And this applies to all communities, not just Maplewood, but all communities, is that your green space set-aside areas are only as protected as the legal covenants that have been placed upon them to protect them, or the backbone of your elected politicians. Because if you've got politicians and elected officials who do not see the value of having neighborhood preserves and set-aside protected green space areas, if they do not value them and they can see that there's better, higher use for that land for a public purpose, they have the right, they have the vote, and they can make that change. And so in Maplewood, we have the Priory Preserve, which while I was mayor, we were fortunate enough to be able to get a conservation easement on and to protect that neighborhood preserve. The Joy Park Preserve has covenants on it from the Joy family. They had the foresight to make sure that those kind of protections were on there before they gave it to a governmental entity. Same way with the Fleacheck Park. The Fleacheck family, before they gave that property to a governmental body, they put protective covenants on it. But many of our other parks and neighborhood preserves in Maplewood do not have that same protection. And it's the same in every other community. So if citizens are concerned about protecting their parks, their neighborhood preserves, or their green areas, set-aside areas, well, you need to look into what needs to be done to better protect them. Now, let's move on to our next clip.
In terms of where we're at tonight, so we are really in the preliminary design process. I mentioned the purpose for being here is just to inform and make you guys aware of what was happening, as well as to receive feedback and comments. We are trying to hit all the city's boards and commissions. The report that will go to City Council in May. and then move forward with final design after that with the goal of having construction occur in late 2014 and 2015.
So that sets out sort of the timeline, so you have an understanding of where we are in the process. Now, it's important for citizens in all communities that when there's a project moving forward that you know what the timeline is, and that if you have something to say, it doesn't hurt going in front of every commission to say what you have to say. Because just because you said it once doesn't mean that the other commissions actually know what you said at the prior commission, because they don't share all the minutes with each of the commissions. Now, the council may get the minutes of each of the commissions, but because of the policy in Maplewood now to have just action minutes from the commissions, not detailed minutes, a council can take a look at those minutes and actually see little or nothing of the discussion that was actually held at that commission meeting, because it doesn't go into detail. The council would have had to have really watched the commission meeting to know what was really said, what was that discussion. And that's why it's important that as citizens, if you went to talk at a commission meeting to try to get them to put something into a resolution that supports your position, you got to go to the council meeting too, because it doesn't guarantee that because you spoke at one that any of the others or the council will have any clue what you said at the one you were at. Let's continue on.
Yeah, you had in one of your bullets mill and overlay for English. Are you referring to just the part of English south of Frost? Because English was just completely redone about 5-6 years ago from 36 down to Frost.
Correct. Basically what's being proposed, the condition of the roundabout itself is actually in pretty poor condition, so that will be reconstructed along with the Frost Avenue piece. But just north and south of the roundabout will be a mill and overlay, so that's in an area that wasn't improved before.
Okay, how old is the roundabout?
I don't know, Tom, do you know? It's probably, I know it's more than 10 years old.
Yeah.
10 to 15 maybe?
About
Yeah.
that.
And it's falling apart.
Well, and the mill and overlay is really to replace the top couple inches of the pavement versus a complete reconstruct, whereas the pavement along Frost Avenue is actually older, and that's getting a more significant reconstruction technique.
All right.
Now, this is a fascinating discussion for me, because I have had a lot of experience in doing research on road improvement projects in Maplewood. And the city staff, when they are proposing a road improvement project to homeowners, they tell them that when that new road goes into their neighborhood, that road is going to have a lifespan of 35 to 40 years, because they go all the way down, they reconstruct the whole base and the bed of the street so that way it's constructed properly, that will improve its lifespan. And you heard that English, north of the roundabout there, Frost and English, 236 was only done a few years ago. And so why would it be in need of a mill and overlay? And I tend to agree with Mr. Tripler here in that seems kind of preposterous. And so what is the reason? And yet if you drive up and down there, you will see that there are places on English Street that are in need of this mill and overlay. So why is it that it's already falling apart? Now, the question about the roundabout at Frost and English, I was on the design review board from, let's see, late 2002, I believe it was, to 2005, the end of 2005. And I believe that roundabout was actually done in 2004, because it came before the design review board because they wanted our input onto whether or not they should have all those big trees in the middle of the roundabout or not. And that was something that we had to discuss when I was on the design review board, and I think that was 2004. So that would mean, given that this is 2014, that roundabout's only been there for about 10 years. And you know, my law office is right there at that intersection of Frost and English, and I'm not certain that I see that roundabout is in poor shape at all. Quite frankly, the city public works personnel in the summertime, they're out there all the time weeding the flowers in that roundabout. So I think it has pretty good care. Let's continue on.
And in your remarks, you said that senior housing was targeted for this area, and then you mentioned the new development that was down on the west end of it. My understanding was that senior housing was also supposed to be part of the new development that's going in where the bowling alley is. Has that changed?
No. No, Commissioners, that has not changed. That is considered phase 2 of that redevelopment project.
All right.
Yep.
So, as I said, the senior affordable housing aspect of it is phase 2. And the first phase, though, of that development, that affordable housing complex there by Sherman and Associates, is anticipated not to start until 2015. And with the criteria for the Metropolitan Council grants, in film footage we've shown in the past, that one of the criteria they had is that a project had to be shovel ready and ready to go. And yet, as things have developed here and unfolded over the last 9 months or so, we have found that Sherman and Associates has not assembled all their money from all the various governmental entities. They have not secured the property. They have the property under a purchase agreement, but it's not purchased. And they also are already going before the City Council asking for pre-approval of a tax increment financing application that has not yet been submitted. So, I don't know. Is it shovel ready? Well, certainly I know the engineers are certainly ready to get their shovels going to do the street infrastructure, but is the construction shovel ready? Let's continue.
One of the things we struggled with when I was on the task force is we wanted people to use the Savannah as a recreational area and as a walking place and stuff like that. And the biggest problem we were trying to deal with was how do you get people from the north side of Frost across 4 lanes of traffic. The original task force recommended a BIBO underneath by Fleetcheck Park. That was taken out by and I guess the problem we saw was that if you develop the villages or whatever they're calling them, and you intend to have senior citizens living there, you're not likely to get senior citizens to want to cross 4 lanes of traffic, even if it is a crosswalk. So what is the plan for getting people from the north side to the south side to use the Savannah?
Yep, yeah, that's a good question because you're correct. The history of the Gladstone redevelopment area was that there would be an underpass crossing, recognizing that there will be a lot of connections between Fleetcheck and the Savannah as well as the redevelopment area in the Savannah.
Of course, here's the issue, is that you see where Fleetcheck is from the redevelopment area, right? How many people do you know who are going to walk all the way down the Fleetcheck to go through an underpass to get to the other side? Very few people. And so that is the reason, in part, why that was taken out of the plan, because it's not practical. Nobody where all the people live is going to walk clear across half a mile away to go underneath the street so they can get to the Savannah. They're going to do the shortcut method. And the shortcut method is just to cut across the street because the Savannah is right across the street. That's what they're going to do. That's human nature. Let's continue on.
It's hard to see on this exhibit, and pointed out, but so basically just where those center medians start, The goal in that area is, again, we're going from a wide roadway with no center median into a situation where we would have a narrower roadway as well as a center median for refuge. So the conversations we've had, is there a mechanism to try to provide a safer pedestrian crossing in that area, basically between kind of the corner of the Savannah and Fleetcheck, maybe a raised table scenario where people have to slow down for that. Maybe it's a pedestrian actuated flasher button to help with that. So I guess the thought was a couple of things. One, narrow the roadway, provide a center median for refuge, and then look at some new technology, like I said, maybe a flashing light system to help warn people that that's a pedestrian crossing at that location.
Okay, because one of the things that we were looking at, well, while we were working on the task force, of course, the roundabout didn't exist, but there was some discussions that it might, and you know, I just don't think anybody in the right mind is going to try to cross at the roundabout, because cars are flying off there, and you know, even if they're not speeding or something, they may not see people in the crosswalk while they're trying to check for traffic and stuff. So the only real crossing for people who are going to be living in that development is going to be where Atlantic is, that little stub there. It's not listed on your map, but I think that, isn't that Atlantic? Isn't that
Yep.
the stub street there?
Yep. So we talked about one there. The other location we potentially talked about one is kind of between where the Villages redevelopment is and then the other areas to the west, potentially one in that location as well, kind of
Okay.
at the break in the center median in that location.
One,
And this discussion is a great discussion because it goes to show you how there's some real inconsistencies in trying to figure out what the plan is. First of all, describing the median as necessary for refuge. I don't actually even know what that means, because you see they're going to have trees in the median. There's going to be all kinds of, as typical, that they usually have little rose bushes and they have all this other landscaping. And so do we really want to have pedestrians tromping through the median, using it for refuge? I don't know. That doesn't seem to be a consistent plan with wanting to create a streetscape, because you've got the one hand, on the one hand you have this desire to create a beautiful streetscape, and yet on the other hand saying that this is going to be a refuge for pedestrians, like they're going to all stand around there in the median, tromping around on the landscaping. The other issue is that I agree with Mr. Tripler that people are not going to be walking through as pedestrians through that roundabout. When I was mayor, I actually had made a call to a company out in Arizona that specifically set up different types of pedestrian crosswalks across areas just like this, and that they had several different ways and systems that they could set up, some of it including the flashing lights, but that individual who was an expert in designing these types of crosswalks in these types of areas, he specifically said that having the pedestrian crosswalk so close to the roundabout like that is actually not a preferred way to do things at all, and is actually quite unsafe. So anyway, I know that when I was mayor, I presented my findings from this company out in Arizona, and that the way that they move pedestrians across the street such as this, but apparently it's gotten lost. Now, we're to the end of our program, and I want to thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Off the Record News. On Friday night, we'll have the Citizens Reporter, and we will continue with some of the other citizen comments that were at the meeting at that program. But thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again next week. Until then, bye-bye.